So those of you that know me in real life, watch this channel, know that Breanna Stewart is easily one of my favorite players, and that I was super excited to try the Stewie 3, especially because a little bit different from the rest of the Stewie line, plus the Stewie 2, Layla Fernandez was wearing them on the tennis tour. It's a pretty cool story with the shoe line. And that's what made the Indiana Jones level saga that I had to go through to get the Stewie 3 that much more frustrating. So now that I have them in hand, let's get into them. All right, now starting off in the uppers, that actually is a pretty cool shoe, but starting off in the uppers, honestly, the lace line to me on these was my favorite part because it is reinforced. Number one, you got the cabling around it, then you have a reinforced lace line as well. You do get a runner's knot. The runner's knot is actually pretty far down the lace line, right? It doesn't come all that proximal, and you can kind of see where this little flare opens up. It would have been nice to have another lace eyelet in this indentation here. I think that would have really aided in lockdown because the midsole, which we'll get into in the teardown, obviously, it is chunky. I mean, it is a big midsole. Now, the one thing I do like is that over top of that cabling here on the lateral side, you do get the reinforcement coming out from the heel counter, right? This TPU piece that's stitched in. That kind of also gives a little more reinforcement, and that reinforces the Puma logo, right? So you've got two levels of foxing overlapping each other. Anytime you get that, you're gonna get a lot more stability in the uppers. You're gonna get a lot more chunkiness up there. Also, you do have that internal heel counter, but then remember, that TPU piece that comes all the way here into the forefoot then goes around, it actually does cross over the middle of the heel counter. So it is still bracing the heel counter as well, which is fantastic. And then on the medial side, you can see where it's a little bit more chunky. That Puma logo is actually pretty chunky here as well. One thing I will say about the cabling though, is you look on the inside of the shoe, it actually wraps up under the inside of the shoe and then it's stitched to the top. So it's not just glued down under there, it actually overlaps on the inside, so it does have some strength, right? It's not gonna wanna pull out, which is really fantastic. Now, the rest of the uppers, a lot of padding. The tongue is really super padded, and you do get some pretty dense padding here in the forefoot. There is 2 layers of that padding. The outside with that weave, it does look like it's gonna breathe a lot. However, it does not. Now, number one, these are very low volume uppers because like I said, the midsole rides pretty high. It's a drop in and it's pretty chunky. Plus it's a low volume shoe. So look at the breathability test on these things. They did still heat up 122.7 degrees, which is pretty good. I mean, and what I notice is when I do the breathability test now, I take the thermometer and I actually go over the top of the shoe while I'm doing the breathability test to see, where, if there's heat escaping places that I'm not seeing it on the breathability mapping. And on this one, I mean, the tongue was heating up a little bit more when I was doing the breathability test, but most of that was getting trapped in the drop-in midsole as well as in the foam. And then when I was cutting the shoe open a few minutes later, right, I did these ones, I also cut open a few other shoes when I was cutting these open. And after a while, I still went in there and it was still warm under those foam pads. So you look at the breathability mapping of these, like I was saying, fog's really not getting out of anywhere besides the sides of the tongue, right? So the materials are light, but I even did notice when I had these on and I was in a pretty warm gym, right? It was pretty humid in there. I did notice I was sweating pretty good in these. The one, like I said, the saving grace is the materials are very light. So as long as you're not in really, really humid conditions and you're wearing a pair of socks that I think does okay with heat exchange, it's gonna be okay. Remember, with drop-in midsoles, except with Nike, usually they are going to heat up a little bit more than others. And you look at the upper durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Honestly, very pleasantly surprised. The painted drag guard here, it does start to wear through that, but it does not even make an impression on the woven layer underneath of it. Honestly, the Stewie 3 to me, one of the better built shoes I've seen this year. The build quality on these things is out of this world. I mean, there's just so much reinforcement. There's so much thought taken into where the different elements are placed on here. For a drop-in shoe with this much chunkiness, the heel slippage wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and it's going to get better as you mold in that drop-in midsole. So it was about mild to moderate at the beginning, but I could even tell breaking these in when I did that the slippage was getting less and less and less I was in them. So like I said, it would be better if it had the back lace eyelet, but all things considered with how low volume the shoe is, really not that bad. But before I get into the midsole, the one thing I want to make mention of is the laces. They're nice and flat. They do lock down pretty well, but unlike the rest of the uppers, they are a little bit flimsy. So the more you're locking them down, the more you're tying them over and over again, these might start to get a little bit frayed. So just watch out for that. All right, getting into the midsole teardown. I know this is a drop-in midsole shoe, but because it's got a bunch of different elements, I did want to see how thick the shank was, really the extent of the nitro foam and everything like that. Now, number one, this is a super meaty, chunky drop-in midsole, and it is almost an entire bed of Pro Foam Plus, which is the same thing on the TRC Blaze Court, one of the bounciest shoes I've ever tested on this channel. The thing is when it becomes a drop-in situation, that does change a little bit. We'll see that in a second on the bounce height test. But you do have a shank that goes from the rear foot into the midfoot, so it is nice and long, it is bottom loaded, and it is on a drop-in, so it can only do so much in a drop-in, but you can feel it underneath there. There is a little more stability imparted to the shoe because of it. And then a little slab of nitro foam. I mean, it is bottom loaded, but it is nice to know it is under there, under the ball of your foot, maybe just for a little bit more of a spring back when you are up, on your toes and trying to push off. So, I mean, that is nice. But speaking of that, if you do look at the bounce height test on these things, only 24 centimeters in the rear foot, 33 in the forefoot. That just shows you what the difference is between an integrated midsole or traditional midsole and a drop-in is. Even with that Pro Foam Plus, which is nuts, right? It feels so bouncy, it feels so good when it's integrated into the shoe. When it's in a drop-in, the shoe just does not feel as, springboard-like, as bouncy and lively as it's going to, as an integrated shoe, because there's nothing for it to bounce off of. Remember, because the rest of the shoe is just allowed to flop around. And yes, there is a shank in there. Remember, the shank is just attached to a removable insole, right? It's just attached to a piece of foam. It's not necessarily integrated into the entire shoe. Like a lot of other Puma shoes where you do get the bottom-loaded shank in them, but it's kind of fused in with the outsole tread, right? So it's kind of all acting as one unit. There you can see kind of the difference between a traditional and a drop-in. Remember, this shoe is much more meant for balance and containment in a low volume shoe. It's definitely meant for more confidence with your plant foot, so just don't expect these to be the TRC Blaze Court in terms of bounce and in terms of launch. But remember, they also have some other tools, on the back end. But getting into the outsole tread, it is this tree trunk pattern, kind of flowers out from these central spines. The tread is incredibly dense, right? It almost kind of mimics, most of Puma's traditional midsole foams. It's incredibly dense. It does have these teardrops that go along the outside of it, which is pretty cool. If you look at it on the viewing box, you can kind of tell that there's not a lot of individual rubber movement on this thing. So really, the tread is relying on it working as a whole, right? Working as a full-length tread pattern. You look at the grip test ramp, it doesn't slip till 45 degrees. So, I mean, initial grip is very good on these things. It's just when dust gets on these, when dirt gets on these, really when there's an obstruction on there and the tread can't work all together, kind of like in the Curry flow line, right? When that tread can't all work as one unit, that's when it starts to, lose grip. And that's why these things aren't the best for outdoor courts. Even though, if you look at the outsole durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, about 1 millimeter of damage. I mean, not terrible. Durometer comes in at 14.75, so it's not terrible. It's just that as soon as this tread starts wearing down and starts melting together, you're gonna lose all the best parts of it. So to me, even though it can handle an outdoor court for a little bit of time, like I said, the best parts of the shoe are meant for indoor hardwood and rubberized courts. If you keep it on those, I think the durability is good enough for these to last, the duration, as well as give you that good solid grip for the duration as well. So it's really just not worth it to take it outdoors for any length of time. And taking a look at the speed ratio, they come in at a 1.63, oof, and then with the shank score of 0.2, that bumps them up to a 1.83, still not great. It just, the shoe is actually pretty heavy, and it's very bottom heavy. I mean, for a drop-in midsole shoe, right? We're used to seeing a lot of these drop-in shoes that are incredibly light, right? They're like feathers. Whereas the Stewie 3, it feels much more like a traditional Puma shoe, right? Very bottom heavy, very bottom stable. However, if you're looking for a drop-in shoe that feels very bottom stable, that you want to drop in, then this is your shoe, right? You want all that Pro Foam Plus underfoot? Yeah, this is your shoe. Just don't expect them to be rocket ships. Same thing with the bounce height test. They're quick side to side, and they allow a lot of confident movement side to side. So if you're like Brianna Stewart and you bring all the rest of it to the table anyway, you just need something as a solid base to push off of, right? You've got all the other tools in spades, then yeah, these are fantastic. And in terms of the fit of the Stewie 3, remember, as of right now, these are coming in women's sizes. So if you're a male looking for this shoe, you want to size up 1.5. Now, these things have a 9-degree inflare, which honestly isn't terrible. You can feel it though because of the rails that drop in. And when you look at the length and the width, remember I always say on a drop in, you have to look at usable space. Because remember, these rails of the drop in here right? Like they're gonna compress a little bit. So in terms of length, they came in at 28.7, which is pretty standard, but then width, they only come in at 8.9 just because those rails are pretty chunky. Now I noticed that my foot was kind of pushing down on the medial side. So the more that you wear these, the wider they're going to feel. Whether that's a good thing or not, it remains to be seen. So I'd say if you are a narrow or medium foot, you just go true to size on these, and honestly, you're gonna get a pretty nice snug fit. If you are a 2E, I probably would try to go up a half size on these. You start going up more sizes, this shoe is gonna start feeling very bottom heavy. If you're a 4E, honestly, a lot of drop-ins with these rails, not just the Stewie, a lot of the ones with these rails, they're just a mismatch for your foot, especially if like a bunion or Taylor's bunion. You're gonna start to wear these things pretty weird. If you are a 2E going up a half size, I would watch for a little bit of heel slippage and like I said, until you break the shoe in. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, in terms of a drop-in, like the Way of Wade 808 line, these are one of the better ones just because that Pro Foam Plus, how chunky it is with the shank on the bottom of it, it is gonna load share a little bit. Plus ball of foot pain, you know, you do get that nitro foam there, which is pretty resilient. So in terms of a drop-in for heel pain or ball of foot pain, they're honestly not bad. The thing is the low volume forefoot, if you got arthritis or anything, you got swelling in your forefoot, or you really need to be able to bend that big toe joint, these things are just gonna take a little bit longer to break in, right? They're just not gonna wanna bend in the forefoot like some others, just because of the low volume nature and how high the stack of the drop-in is. So remember, you can't put an orthotic in a drop-in midsole shoe. I know there's gonna be someone in the comments asking if they can put an orthotic in these that didn't watch this section of the video, but you can't put an orthotic in a drop-in midsole. You can put the little sticker pads on them here and there, but suffice to say, if you're okay with the setup of the drop-in and your feet like a drop-in and you want that protection, they're good. If you need to put an orthotic in there, then get a shoe with a traditional midsole. And in terms of the performance of the Stewie 3, I really put these things to the ringer because as you'll be able to tell in a few seconds, I actually started taking basketball lessons a lot of the time with people half my age and double my stamina. And so my coach, who is good but demanding, really has me doing a lot of footwork drills. And so with these and, you know, the rest of the shoes I'm gonna do this summer, with doing 2 days a week basketball lessons, I've really been able to put these shoes and you know, and all these others through a lot of different situations, right? Ones that I just don't do on my own because I just don't think to do them, or, you know, there's not just somebody yelling at me to, you know, get through the cones. In terms of the Stewie 3 though, I did notice when doing mostly the footwork drills and trying to stay low to the ground, these were really tremendous. I mean, they really were sure-footed, underfoot with that full-length tread pattern. And the gym I've been playing in, it gets really humid in there, so the traction on the court is not as good as, say, some of the community centers I play in, which aren't really humid at all. That court is just pristine at all times, right? It doesn't get used as much. So I really noticed that these, the sure-footedness of them was outstanding. Yeah, they do feel pretty bottom heavy. I mean, they're a heavier shoe, right? And like I said, they don't launch off the ground as much. But the thing I like about that is it is a true signature shoe, right? You can tell they're meant for Breanna Stewart, right? I mean, you watch her game, these things fit perfectly with that, right? If you're already bringing that to the table, you just need a solid, secure base to plant off of, right? You want something stable to get low to the ground on. Or if you're someone that kind of wants a little bit more of that balance with a drop-in midsole shoe, right? You want the agility of the drop-in without, you know, feeling like you're gonna pummel through it, right? Like on the Kobe 8 Pro Tro I just did. You know, it just felt like I was pushing right through the shoe. Yeah, it felt super agile, it felt super feathery, but I mean, what do you pay for on the back end of that? Whereas on these, you get a lot of that agility, you get the stability though, right? You're just getting a little bit more bottom heavy feeling on these. The Pro Foam Plus does help, but like I said, if you liked the Stewie line, like the ones and the twos, you'll probably like these. You just have to want to drop in. So love to hear your thoughts on the Stewie 3. If you've picked up a pair, if they have them in your size and you're allowed to buy them, let me know in the comments down below. And speaking of, like I said about the Kobe 8 Pro Tro, if you do want to see how I thought those performed, especially with the newer React drop-in, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.